Hi, this is Non-Monogamous Mark coming to you from my home in Ventura, California, and I'm here with my partner Kathy, and we're going to tell you about our evening we had this evening, and it's really all about how you talk to people when you're out about non-monogamy. So we're going to title this "Talking About Non-Monogamy." In actuality, this happens to us quite often, where we go out, and maybe it's because we look for opportunities, or just we're not shut down. We don't let people shut us down from who we are and living and being our authentic self. And so we go out tonight. We weren't going to spend much time out. We just wanted to go out for a quick beer at a local brew pub. And they make the beer there, and we had not been there before, so we wanted to taste their beer, and we go out there. The place is just packed. Well, we were able to get two chairs at a table, and at that table was four other people. And so sitting across from us were two men, and they were in their 40s, and they were brother-in-laws. And that the guy sat across from me, he married the sister of the guy that sat across from Kathy. And then to my right was a woman, and probably in her late 20s.
Yeah.
And she was waiting for her husband. So she had already gotten two beers, and she was just there waiting. He had texted her or something, "I'm on my way." And so she was waiting for her husband. And we sat down, and I guess the guy that was across from you was actually lives in Ohio.
Right.
But he's from this area because their parents are celebrating a wedding anniversary or something like that.
Right. So he was out visiting.
Yeah, so he was out visiting. And I just, this is how you get into these conversations. You make some kind of a comment where, it's going to stretch people's mind. And for me, I just made the comment. I says, "Oh, well, when you're here," because he grew up in this area. And I says, "Well, when you're here, you really should go to the nude beach and hang out there for a while." And, sometimes people will respond if I say something like that. They'll say, "Oh, no, I couldn't do that."
Yeah,
Or whatever.
no, that's not for me.
But, that usually something like that, oftentimes, more cases than not, it opens up a conversation. In this case, they come back and it says, "Well, where's the nude beach?"
Right.
And so we talked about the nude beach. And he says, "Oh, yeah, I know that beach." And how did we end up going from there to non-monogamy?
Usually it's a series of things. We talk about our own relationship. We mentioned will be some flirty.
Oh, I probably mentioned about my also living. They talked. Oh, that was it. They said, "Well, do you live here?"
Here.
And we said, "Well, we live here, and then I also live in Seattle, where my girlfriend lives with me." And that just like, huh? It's always interesting how surprised people are by that, because they see that I'm with her and I'm talking about my girlfriend, and it's like,
and I'm not batting an eye.
Yeah. And it's really shocking.
Yeah,
and,
for a lot of people.
And this happens quite regularly. In fact, we've really kind of made it a thing where we always make sure that we try to look for opportunities to be able to introduce ourselves as a couple, and then talk about my girlfriend.
That's right. And introduce the concept of non-monogamy. And then it's usually, well, does she know about you? Or just, obviously you seem to know because he's mentioning her in front of you. And then it's, does she know? Yes, we've all met. It's all, on the up and up, and we all know each other.
And so what was really interesting in this whole conversation, as we start to open up, and I talked about the fact that Kathy is bisexual, and that we really enjoy having relationships that are sexual with our friends. And we started talking about polyamory and swinging and different kinds of relationship dynamics in non-monogamy, and how many people are actually involved in non-monogamy, but everybody's in the closet, so nobody ever knows, and it's not something people talk about. And so then, the gal that was sitting to my right, in her late 20s, and her husband hadn't showed up yet. She's like high-fiving me like, "That's great!" And then it was funny, because what happened when her husband showed up?
She completely turned away and had nothing to do with us anymore as soon as he showed up. It was like she had never engaged with us. She didn't want to engage with us. it completely shut her down.
Yeah.
And it was very clear that she has thoughts and ideas and supports, whether she engages in it or not isn't the issue, but she supports non-monogamy and supports people's choices, but she couldn't continue to express that in the company of her husband.
Not even enough to continue having the conversation with us. It was like, right. Once her husband showed up, then it was like there was a big wall between us, and there wasn't. And it was just that, it was them then, and then we continued our conversation. And what happened in our conversation? These are two guys in their 40s. They're related.
Yeah.
Okay.
By marriage.
By marriage. Yeah. One guy married the other guy's sister. Yeah. And so it's like they clam up, right?
Well, actually they didn't. One of them was much more open in the beginning and was engaging, was asking questions. The other one kind of sat back a little bit and was observing and listening and trying to kind of figure it out. And then after about, an hour?
Let me just interrupt here, because the thing that from my own experience and personally, how I experienced starting to open up the ideas of non-monogamy from my religious background was, that somebody wasn't afraid to have a conversation with me.
Yeah.
And even though I was the self-righteous, pious, judgmental, religious Christian that was telling him and his girlfriends that they shouldn't be carrying on the way that they do, and trying to make sure that he understood that it just wasn't right. And yet his girlfriends then would talk to me and saying, this man is the most loving man. He loves all three of his girlfriends. Well, but it doesn't matter if he loves all three of his girlfriends. It's just not right. But he's the most kind and gentle, wonderful, loving man. And I heard this from all three of his girlfriends separately. And so, even though I was there putting on my suit of being the religious Christian that I lived my life to be, what was happening is that the wheels in my head started to turn. And so you never really know when you open up and have these conversations with strangers. You have no risk, nothing to risk here. And so you open up these conversations and you never know where those wheels will end up.
That's very true.
And so in this case, the one guy, he was the quiet guy.
He was, yeah, for about the first hour.
For about the first hour. And then he started coming back with lots of really good questions, not judgmental questions, not critical questions. It was like, well, so how do you talk to your spouse about this?
How would you approach it?
How would you approach it? And how did you know that, like I've shared my experience when I was in my monogamous marriage for 25 years and sexually miserable. And it's like, then, well, but how did you know that there would be something better for you out there? So his questions were very inquisitive. And yet this was not at all an unusual situation for us.
No, this happens a lot to us. But we also create the conversation. We create this so we can have the conversation, so we can further ECNM in people's minds and show that we're not afraid to talk about it. And we hope that you won't be afraid to at least think about it.
Well, another thing that came up in the early conversation before we really got very far into non-monogamy was we talked about children. One of them and sexuality. Because one of them has a 5-year-old, and the other has a 14-year-old. The 5-year-old, in fact, came out the other day and had a hard-on, and his little boy, and had a hard-on, and was talking to his daddy, not knowing what to make of that. And his daddy did the right thing, and just by saying, hey, yeah, daddy gets those too, and it's okay.
And didn't make a big deal out of it.
That's right. Just didn't make a big deal out of it.
It happens, and don't worry about it.
And so we really had quite an in-depth conversation, because then the other guy, he's like, got this 13-year-old boy, and he doesn't want to talk to his 13-year-old about sex. Right. And my girlfriend in Seattle, Chris, she has a son who's now 13 years old, and 2 years ago, Chris took him off to this class that was given at a hospital in the area to teach people, young kids, little boys, and then a separate class for girls going from puberty and on into the whole stages. You know, and they talked about masturbation there. And so here at 11 years old, he learned about masturbation. And it's really kind of an open subject in our home. And so, you know, he talked about with this guy with his 13-year-old, and it's far from any kind of an open subject in his home.
Exactly.
And so that, I think, really started to get his thoughts going. Because we weren't afraid to talk about sex and things that should be totally normal for adults to have normal conversation about.
Right.
You don't have to be taboo and shy and timid and, oh, I can't talk about those things, you know. And that's then how we present it when we talk to, we mentioned tonight, when you talk to your kids, is present it as something that's good and normal and natural, and teach them how to properly enjoy a healthy sex life.
Absolutely.
And so we had that conversation. Must have been for at least 10 or 15 minutes.
Oh, at least, yeah.
And so that one guy just kind of took it all in. And then we got into talking very deeply about non-monogamy. We was talking about my history and talked about Kathy's history. We talked about my other partner. We talked about Kathy being bisexual, and Kathy, when she dated when she was in high school, a boy and a girl, and all kinds of things. And so we, you know, he was really keenly interested.
He was.
And so all we had to do is to get the ball rolling. And we have found this to happen to us almost everywhere we go.
Everywhere we go.
You know, we were on a cruise ship, and we just opened up, sharing our lives, our authentic self. We have nothing to risk, nothing to hide. We're not ashamed of our lives. And so by sharing our authentic selves and saying we're non-monogamous, we have sex with other people. We have relationships that could be deeply emotionally loving relationships with other people. And this became part of the conversation tonight. He was like, well, how do you control your emotions?
Right.
And we had a lot of conversation.
He was asking questions around the separation between love and sex, and how do you separate that? And so we talked about.
And this is where people's insecurities come up, you know, because then it finally came out, and I just hit him with it. I says, well, you know, when we moved here to Ventura, and I knew I'd be spending half my time in Seattle, I went through a week where my insecurities kicked in. And during that week, then I was thinking, oh my God, what if when she goes to Ventura and she moves there to Southern California, and I don't know how it's going to work out with her and I carrying on our relationship or anything, but I just knew it was the right thing to do for her to move here. But it's for a week I went through just terror and dealing with, you know, like I could lose her, and she could come here and find someone that she liked more and could meet her needs and be with her all the time and these kinds of things, you know. And so this gentleman, he kind of approached that differently, and then I finally just hit him with it. He says, really, it's our fear that we're going to lose our other person. And I said, the questions he was asking, well, what if she found somebody that she liked having sex with better than she liked having sex with you? You know, and we talked about how it's a package. It's not just sex. You know, there are people, I mean, I love when she cooks, but there are women out there that are much better cooks than she is.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't mean that I'm going to go find a better cook and find that that's the woman I'm going to run off with. Same thing, I'm not going to find a woman who I just am like amazing at how great the sex is with, and then want to run off with her. Because it's a package when it comes to a relationship.
That's right.
It's not about cooking. It's not about sex. It's about the complete package.
Right.
And then I had to tell him, I says, you know, and for that week that I dealt with my own insecurities, what I came back with at the end of that week was that, hey, if that happened, that one, I know that she found a really great guy to have in her life because I'm a good catch.
Yeah.
And so I would know that she found a really great, amazing man in her life, and I want to be happy for her. Would I hurt? Would there be pain involved? Yes.
Sure.
But then on the other part of that, though, was that I would also know that there must be something even better coming down the track for me.
Right.
And so it's like, not like life is over, because if we approach it that, yes, my life would be over if I ever lost you,
Right.
then guess what? If I ever lost you, my life would be over and
would
I'd be
be.
miserable.
Absolutely.
But just like the heartbreaks that I had in relationships before you and I ever found each other, that I learned to make heartbreak my friend.
Mm-hmm.
And I've shared that on videos before, that I learned that as a bicyclist, where instead of coming to a hill and you look at that hill and think, oh, I hate hills, oh! You look at that hill and say, hills are my friend, because they are what helped me to get in better shape and better condition. They certainly do a lot more for me than just kind of going along on the flats. And so the hills are my friends. And I took that, and hills can be painful as a bicyclist, but I learned to make the hills my friend, and I became a better bicyclist, a healthier, more fit person as a result. And when in my relationships in polyamory, then where I got very emotionally attached to other women. I mean, this is before I ever met Kathy, but Chris would tell you that, yes, I would get deeply emotionally attached to other women. And then when the relationship, for whatever reason, would end, I'd be deeply hurt. But after one of my hurts, it took me 2 years to get over, then I realized that I needed to make heartbreak my friend. And just like those hills, how they make me better and stronger and healthier, when I learned to make heartbreak my friend, I became healthier, stronger, and better. And from that then, I started to understand that my life doesn't have to end. My life can also continue on and be better than it ever was before with that person. I can continue to be grateful and appreciative for that relationship that I had, and to continue to love that person in my heart and move on with my life and live my life, not let it die and be miserable.
Exactly. So in sharing that with other people, it really is a different mindset than monogamy. Because in monogamy, we want to be attached to that person. They are the one and only. And when you move into non-monogamy, you really can let go of those attachments to people and to relationships, and truly embrace them for what they are and what they bring to your life and what you share in that, rather than being so possessive and connected with just that one person. And so that's what we shared tonight with these two gentlemen, and it really did get their wheels turning. And
it really did.
And it was a really fun experience.
And as you start to be able to talk to people yourselves, then that also just helps you to realize, wow, I am learning a lot about non-monogamy, and that it really is a lot different than monogamy. Because too often, and in fact, I'm reminded of this story. These two boys who would once in a while have a sleepover, and the boy had a bunk bed, and they'd sleep on the top of the bunk bed, and the boy that was his house and his bed, then he at times then would fall out of bed at night when he had a friend of his sleep over. And so his friend would ask him, well, I noticed that you fall out of bed once in a while. Why is it that you do that? And the little boy thought about that. And he says, I guess it's because I get too close to the place where I get into bed. And that's why he falls out. He's too close to where he got in. And sometimes we live our non-monogamous life the same way. We're too close to where we got into the non-monogamous life. We're too close to monogamy because that's been our default for our whole life. That's the only thing that we see out there that is, I call it the false normal. It's not normal. It's not it's not really our cultural norm at all, because when you look at all the statistics, over half the people out there are non-monogamous. They're just in the closet, or they're secret because they're cheating, all kinds of things going on. But we know that over half the people are living non-monogamous lives out there. And so to think that in our society, monogamy is the norm is a false belief. But that is what we all portray. Most non-monogamous people even carry out their lives in a way of like, well, yeah, we live a monogamous life, because after all, most people would go out to, like we did tonight, and just talk about us being a couple and never talk about my having a girlfriend and our having other people that we enjoy spending time with.
Exactly.
But when you be authentic and real, nobody comes along. I mean, we've been doing this a lot for Well, you and I together for a couple of years, but back before that, I've always kind of, I guess, before I ever started Ethical and Consensual Non-Monogamous Lifestyles Association, I've always kind of just been very open in a way that kind of embarrassed people like Chris, who's monogamous to me, and my wife, who for many years was monogamous to me. You know, yeah, they didn't want me to open up and talk to people about, oh yeah, well this is my wife and this is my girlfriend, or things like that, you know, and yet I was the guy with the big mouth that always did. And so I've been doing this for years, but now I'm doing a lot more because of what we're trying to do and accomplish. But we want to help you to have these kinds of conversations with strangers as well. Because I have never been assaulted. I think, one time that I can think of where somebody got upset. I was in getting a haircut, and sitting in the chair, the hair stylist cut person was cutting my hair, and we engaged in a conversation. I talked to her about non-monogamy, and there was somebody getting his haircut in another chair across the way, and after he got his haircut done, I was still in my chair getting my haircut. He came over to tell me a piece of his mind, and then he left. And when he left, the manager of the place came over and apologized to me. You know, and so it's kind of like, that's the only time I can remember anybody has ever done anything in a way where they've been upset or anything like that from my conversations with them.
Well, we had one other.
Did we have one other?
We had one at the nudist camp.
Oh, yes.
Here we are
places.
At a nudist camp, sitting naked, talking to another couple.
That are also sitting naked.
Also sitting naked, and he mentions his girlfriend, and within about 2 minutes, the guy turned to his female partner and said, yeah, we're going to go now, and just packed up their stuff and walked away. And not that they were necessarily angry, but they clearly, he clearly was threatened and did not want to engage in that conversation. Yeah. And very abruptly ended it and just turned around and walked
Because
away.
until I mentioned the fact that I had a girlfriend,
everything
was great. We're having a wonderful conversation with this couple.
Yeah.
But as soon as I mentioned that, it wasn't even 2 minutes later. It was like packing up and we're leaving.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, it does happen.
Yep.
And there are people that don't want to hear about it, and that's fine. But there's a lot of people who will be open to it and start asking questions and, well, what about this? How about this?
How do I have the conversation with my wife?
Yeah.
And all kinds of things that, you know, if nothing else, you get their heads spinning. If nothing else, you'll get, like this guy tonight, you know, I'm sure that he and his wife are going to have a conversation. And it may never change anything in their life. May not be tomorrow, that's right. It may not ever change anything in their life. But they'll at least have the conversation. And that's what we want. We want people to be able to live their authentic life, being able, particularly if you're a couple, being able to share in conversation everything about your life and not feel like you've got to put a lid on it.
That's right.
Like that other gal.
Yeah, absolutely.
At the bar tonight, you know. As soon as her husband showed up, she had a lid on it.
Yep.
You know, that was it. Well, thanks a lot, and I hope this was useful to you, not only in helping you to go out there and talk to strangers about non-monogamy, but maybe we said something in here that also helped you with your non-monogamous life. So this is Non-Monogamous Mark, and if you want to know more about Ethical and Consensual Non-Monogamous Lifestyles Association, then go ahead and click on that link. And if the link isn't working yet, because we've been having some web difficulties, we'll be getting it back up and working soon. So go ahead and click on that link, and thanks a lot.
Good night.